The stars shimmered like ancient memories in the vast dark above, as fire bloomed in space, bright, brutal, and brief. 1,000 lives winked out with each burst, but no one cried. Captain Stone stood on the bridge of his vessel, watching death. Like a man watching the tide. This war had outlived empires, rewritten maps, and devoured centuries. 800 years of blood, and still the killing continued. "We've broken their lines," came the quiet report. The veil were pulling back again. Stone nodded slowly. "And our dead? 3 destroyers, 1 carrier, 2,000 gone. 2,000. He closed his eyes, not in grief, not in shock, simply to mark the number. 2,000 more lost for a patch of empty sky, already stained with 1,000 flags and 1,000,000 corpses. It would change hands again before the month was out. No one even remembered the first cause. Only the rhythm of war remained. Fathers taught sons to fight, and sons grew into men who did the same. No ideology, just momentum. "Send salvage. File the report," Stone said, voices weathered as the hull around him. Beneath them spun a dead planet. Once green, now gray, poisoned, cratered, forgotten. Another monument to a war no one could win. Far across the chaos, aboard a retreating Veil flagship, Admiral Gray studied her fading forces. Her uniform shone with cold precision, hiding the weight of loss. 12 hours of fire, and she had nothing but retreat to show for it. "Sector 7, she commanded. "Regroup and send performance metrics for the new prototype." The weapon had failed to turn the tide, but its data whispered of hope. A breakthrough, perhaps. A future where the veil no longer endured, but prevailed. "More test subjects," said a voice behind her. Gray didn't flinch. "Take them from the prison world. Use the oldest." No one protested. The Dominion had reduced 3 Veil homeworlds to dust in the last 100 years. Whatever remained of Gray's morality had been buried in their ruins, and while Empire's bled stars dry and children were taught to hate, far beyond the carnage, on a pale blue dot untouched by centuries of war, something else stirred. Humanity stood at the edge of its sky, all systems green, said the voice from Earth's first real starship. Captain Wilson sat in the commander's seat of the Pioneer, every breath weighted with history. This wasn't just exploration. It was a species daring to dream beyond its birth cradle. Jump drive charged. Wilson nodded once. "Let's make history." In a breath of light, they were gone, leaving behind the quiet blue of Earth for the chaos of the cosmos. They knew nothing of the endless war, or the shattered planets, or the blood debts older than their own nations. They sought only wonder. But wonder, it seemed, had teeth. They didn't know. They didn't know that their leap into the stars would land them in the middle of a graveyard. That the galaxy was not a place of first contact and celebration, but of ruins, of ancient grudges written in fire, of 2 titanic civilizations locked in a death spiral so long they had forgotten the sky could be anything but hostile. The humans aboard the Pioneer had no knowledge of the billions lost, of cities turned to ash, of children raised in bunkers learning that survival meant silence, and trust was a relic of myth. They didn't know that their presence, naive and pure, would become the spark in a powder keg soaked with 8 centuries of blood. But history does not wait for readiness. It arrives when it will. The Pioneer exited jump space into uncharted black. The stars here did not speak Earth's names. Their instruments flared to life alien signals, static, rich, chaotic. And then, ahead of them, a shape, broken, drifting, bleeding light. An alien vessel, torn open, damaged beyond recognition, but not dead. Not yet. "Life signs," the science officer said, voice tight. Captain Wilson stood still, eyes on the fractured silhouette. Humanity's first contact, not with triumph or ceremony, but with suffering. More signals flared. 6 vessels inbound, fast, armed. The computers struggled to decipher their shape, but their intent was plain. Intercept course, attack posture, prepare. "Boarding parties," Wilson ordered. His officers hesitated. "Captain, we don't know who they are. We don't know anything." He nodded at the display. "That ship is dying. The others are coming to finish the job. I'm not waiting to watch a massacre." And so Earth's first ambassadors were not diplomats. They were rescue teams, crossing the void in suits of polymer and hope, stepping into the smoke-filled wreckage of a dying alien world. They found bodies burned out systems, screams and frequencies the translators couldn't yet parse. But they also found survivors tall, four-armed beings with skin like twilight mist and eyes that flickered with fear. At first, the aliens recoiled, but when they saw the humans helping, lifting, carrying, stabilizing, their panic ebbed. One among them, thin and steady, pointed to the approaching threat and made a single gesture across his throat. Enemy. Wilson understood. Bring everyone we can back, now. By the time the attackers arrived, 23 survivors had been pulled aboard the Pioneer. The officer who had warned them, Reed, they named him, watched from a medbay gurney, confused as humans tried to save lives without demand or condition. And then the message came, the screen filled with a harsh face, red-skinned and sharp-eyed. You have interfered in Dominion operations. The voice snarled, rough and partially translated. Surrender the Veil criminals or be destroyed with them. Wilson stood tall. I am Captain Wilson of the Earthship Pioneer. These beings are under our protection. Earth, you are not known to us. This is not your concern. Surrender, or perish. Beside him, Reed stood unsteady, his voice rough, broken. Why? Help us. You. No, not us. Wilson met his gaze. Because it's right. Reed didn't understand. In a galaxy where war had burned out all higher ideals, right had no weight, no meaning. But he remembered the hands that pulled his crew from death, and something small, fragile began to shift. The Dominion ship hovered on the screen, bristling with weapons, hunger for violence humming in its silence. This was how they had always operated, speak once, then strike. But the Pioneer did not back down. Earth's ship, though smaller, held firm. Inside the medbay, the survivors were stabilized. Reed watched human doctors move with calm urgency, administering care with no thought of species or sides. In a war of annihilation, these people had chosen mercy. He didn't know how to make sense of it. The Dominion hailed again. You have made your choice, the red-faced commander growled. Prepare to die with them. Wilson remained unmoved. We won't surrender people in need. He didn't speak in threats. He didn't posture. He simply refused to comply with cruelty. The humans weren't ready for war, but they weren't built to bow to it either. And so, as the Dominion ships moved in, Earth began something unexpected. They built a station, a place of peace, not strategy, between the Veil and Dominion territories, where hatred simmered just beneath every action. A structure began to rise. Built in mere months by human hands, it stood not as a fortress, but as a question. What if war wasn't the only option? They called it Hope Station. Ambassador Clark sat within its circular chambers, dressed plainly, offering no show of strength or wealth. The room was equal by design, no throne, no favored side, only chairs and a table. First came the Dominion, proud, rigid, metals gleaming like accusations. Their red skin darkened at the neck, a signal humans had come to understand. Tension. Then arrived the Veil, graceful, gliding, every movement heavy with ancestral meaning. They wore stories on their skin, tattoos inked in memory and mourning. Neither would sit first. So Clark did. The host sits first, he said quietly. Guests follow by order of arrival. The Dominion, unused to being told what to do without force, hesitated then obeyed. The Veil followed, watching their enemies as if expecting betrayal with every blink. We're not here to rewrite history, Clark began. We're here to talk about what the future could be if we're willing. The Dominion pounded fists. The Veil hissed with rage. Centuries of hatred spilled like poison on the floor. Clark didn't interrupt. He listened. He let the wounds open. And then, when they paused to breathe, he asked something no one had asked in hundreds of years. How many of your people live as refugees? What does your frontier need most? The aliens blinked, uncertain. Wars weren't waged over needs. They were waged over revenge, pride, cycles. But the questions lingered, and when both sides admitted their dependency on the same resource-rich sector, Clark offered another question. What if humans did the mining? Neutral, efficient, shared, equally? Silence answered him. Not because it was absurd, but because it had never even been imagined. Distrust rose immediately. They'll sabotage, said one side. They'll cheat, said the other. Clark nodded. Then don't trust each other. Trust us. Not a demand, a proposition. And while leaders wrestled with fear, in a laboratory not far from the meeting room, something happened that no weapon had ever achieved. Collaboration. A human engineer admired Veil power systems. Ever try merging these with Dominion shields? Could boost resonance by 60. The Veil technician stared. That would be seen as She couldn't finish. The idea itself was forbidden. A Dominion scientist overheard. His voice was skeptical. It would match, mathematically, and so they tried, not because they trusted each other, but because the math was beautiful. For the first time in 800 years, minds from both sides built something together, not a weapon, a solution. Small, fragile, but real. The room was still tense, but the air had changed. Possibility had entered the conversation. No one said the word aloud. It was too dangerous, too hopeful, but it hung there, like breath before a storm. Clark leaned forward, voice calm. 3 months, one mining site, joint protection, equal distribution. At the end, we evaluate. The Dominion commander narrowed his eyes. The veiled diplomat folded all for arms. Neither wanted to be the first to say yes. We will consider it, one finally said. So will we, said the other. Not a treaty. Not yet. But the first time in living memory that both sides had not responded to suggestion with blood, that alone was something sacred. Elsewhere on the station, cooperation bloomed in places where politics had not yet poisoned hearts. Engineers swapped designs. Technicians compared losses and laughed at how much alike their problems were. Shared goals melted layers of inherited distrust. But hope is never left unchallenged for long. It happened fast. An explosion tore through Hope Station, shattering bulkheads and peace in equal measure. Smoke filled the corridors. Fire flickered against steel. Screams echoed in 3 languages. Ambassador Clark pulled himself from the rubble, ears ringing. How many? He demanded. 80 dead. More wounded. A Vale medic with steady arms and frantic hands helped lift a human to safety. Nearby, a Dominion security team cleared debris without orders, without pause. For a moment, there was only survival. No factions, no flags, just life. But the moment couldn't last. Accusations flared like plasma fire. The Dominion planted the bombs. Lies. The Vale are trying to kill negotiations. In the medbay, Clark watched the breaking news. Fleets moved into attack positions. The stars around them readied themselves for yet another war. Earth mourned. And then Earth decided. General Hill stood before the World Council, her face lined with exhaustion, but not defeat. We will not respond with vengeance, she said. But we will respond. Her plan was not retaliation. It was revelation. 1 week later, Earth's first defense fleet entered contested space. 20 ships, small, quiet, but they carried something no Dominion or Vale vessel had ever seen. Harmony, reverse engineered. Systems from both alien powers, rebuilt, combined, improved, not stolen, integrated. Between 2 armadas 100 strong, Earth's 20 ships formed a single line. This is General Hill of the Earth Defense Force, came the broadcast. Stand down, now. The aliens laughed. What could 20 ships do against centuries of war? You have 10 minutes to comply, she said. The countdown began. Across both fleets, officers prepared for slaughter. But then, something new happened. From Earth's ships, small objects launched. Drones, unarmed, fast, too fast to target. They attached themselves to hulls like whispers. First came confusion, then the malfunctions, weapons offline, shields down, navigation blind, not broken. Disarmed, across the silence, screens lit up, security footage from the attack, figures in unfamiliar suits, planting charges. Not Vale, not Dominion, something else. This is who you've been fighting for. Hill's voice rang out. They are called the Harvesters. For centuries, they had sold weapons to both sides, profiting from endless war, ensuring neither side ever gained enough ground to win. Their goal was not conquest. It was chaos. Both fleets went still. The enemy was not who they thought. For the first time in 8 centuries, the real question emerged. What if the war was never truly yours to begin with? The silence between the fleets was deeper than space. For the first time in 800 years, they weren't looking at each other through sights. They were looking inward, at how easily they had been used. The footage spoke for itself. The Harvesters' small, gray beings posing as neutral traders had sold flawed weapons, just strong enough to kill, just weak enough to never end the fight. They had stoked fear with false intelligence, fanned hatred with sabotage, and played both sides like pieces on a board, and no one had questioned it. Rex, Dominion fleet commander, stared at the data in cold fury. The Dominion does not forgive betrayal. Admiral Gray of the Vale gave a slow, solemn nod. For once, we agree. On board the human flagship Peacekeeper, Captain Bell watched the change unfold. It wasn't trust yet, not even close. But the blinders were gone. "We'll restore your ships," she said, calm but firm. "Except for the primary weapons. Those will stay locked until the harvesters are dealt with." No one argued. The journey to the outer rim began, a strange convoy, Dominion, Vale, and human ships flying in uneasy formation. Every scanner was tuned to friend and foe alike. No one dared speak of peace, but no one fired either. At the edge of known space, nestled in the shadows of an asteroid field, they found it, the Harvester base, massive, fortified, designed for survival above all else. Centuries of stolen technology, of war profits and suffering. Hidden behind its shields. In the command center of the Peacekeeper, representatives from all three species stood together for the first time. Not to debate, to plan. "We can't breach their front defenses," said a Dominion strategist. "We approach from below the ecliptic," suggested a Vale tactician, tracing angles with two hands. "The asteroid density will conceal our path." Bell listened. She didn't lead with dominance. She led with space for others to think, to speak. And where there was space, ideas grew. "What if we use the asteroids themselves as cover?" she asked. "Strike teams, mixed species, close range, entry." They paused. The idea was bold, risky, but it came from outside the patterns the harvesters had grown to expect, and so they built the teams: Vale stealth, Dominion force, human coordination. Each carried scars from the war, each carried something more dangerous than any weapon. Perspective. As the session ended, an old Dominion commander lingered. "In 8 centuries, I've never shared a plan with a Vale officer." Bell offered no judgment. "Sometimes it takes an outsider to show you the obvious." "And what is obvious to you, human?" She looked past him to the stars. "That you are more alike than different. That your people are exhausted. And that maybe, just maybe, you're ready to build instead of destroy." The old warrior said nothing, but he didn't walk away. Not yet. The next day, the assault began. They didn't call it war. Not this time. They called it Operation Truth. They moved in silence. Vale commandos glided through asteroid shadows like whispers. Dominion shock troopers clung to hulls with precision forged by centuries of siege. Human operatives guided the operation, stitching instincts and tech into something new. Team Alpha, Team Beta, Team Gamma. 3 languages, 1 mission: infiltrate the Harvester stronghold. End the deception. Inside the base, they found not monsters, but mechanisms: rooms of numbers, halls of calculations, screens tracking casualties like currency. Weapons for both the Vale and Dominion, meticulously engineered to fail at just the right moment. This was not chaos. This was control. Even more damning were the archives. Records spanning centuries, patterns of influence, timelines of sabotage, names of field agents, political puppets, assassinated peacekeepers, silenced scientists. Every time the Vale came close to victory, the Harvesters tipped the balance. Every time the Dominion threatened to win, the same. They hadn't fought each other. They'd fought the illusion of each other. A Dominion officer stared at the evidence, fists trembling. All those battles, all those dead. For this, a Vale technician ran fingers over names she recognized. Family, friends, gone, not to war, but to manipulation. "They played us," she said. "They played all of us." The Harvester leaders were caught fleeing. Small, gray, unremarkable. They didn't resist. They didn't plead. They simply explained. "War is profitable," one said. "Peace is not." They said it like it was math. But Earth had come with a different equation. Back on Earth, Director Wells stood before the World Council, her voice sharp with urgency. "We've cracked the cycle, but the fracture is small. If we don't act now, it will seal again." She didn't ask for retaliation. She asked for reconstruction, not as saviors, as stewards. Her proposal was radical: the creation of a Galactic Reconciliation Council, joint human, Vale, and Dominion oversight, neutral zones, shared cities, rebuilt colonies where former enemies would lay the bricks side by side. Predictably, both alien governments resisted. Live together? The Dominion commander scoffed. "After all that's happened, you expect us to forget the debts?" hissed the Vale elder. Wells didn't flinch. "No, I expect you to try. Because we've spoken not just to your leaders but to your people. They're tired. They want something else for their children." It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, even the hardest hearts saw the cracks. Just 1 year, Wells said. Pilot programs, voluntary. If it fails, return to war. But if it works, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Reluctantly, both sides agreed. The first joint settlement was born on a border world. They called it Harmony. The name made everyone uncomfortable, but names have power, and this one dared to dream. Harmony was no utopia. It was raw, uneasy, fragile. 100 Veil, 100 Dominion, 50 humans to guide, mediate, and when needed, remind. The first week passed in silence, the second in stares, the third in shouting matches and clenched fists. Hatred doesn't vanish when peace is signed. It lingers in glances, in old scars, in the way a voice sharpens at a remembered name. But something happened. A Dominion child fell ill, something genetic, something uncurable with their medicine. A Veil healer stepped forward, quietly, and healed her. No questions asked. Days later, a Veil family's shelter collapsed in a storm. It was Dominion engineers who rebuilt it better than before. Not because they were asked, but because it needed doing. Small acts, barely noticed. But to those watching closely, the ground had shifted. Humans watched not as masters, but as students of possibility. They saw cracks form in the walls of centuries. And through those cracks, light began to seep. When Director Wells visited 2 months in, she found something she hadn't expected. Laughter, not much, not loud, but real. Children, Veil and Dominion, running together through the dust. Their parents, watching, uneasy, but allowing it. Not friendship, not yet, but curiosity. A human mediator walked beside Wells, voice low. It's not peace, but it's a beginning. 50 years passed. The world forgot how close it had come to breaking again. Admiral Mason stood aboard the flagship of the Galactic. Peace Corps, his gaze fixed on the stars. 50 years since Earth stumbled into an ancient war. 50 years since a different kind of strength rewrote the galaxy. Admiral, came the voice behind him. All 37 species have confirmed attendance for the ceremony. Mason nodded. None of this had been the plan. Earth hadn't come to the stars with banners or conquest. They came with curiosity, with a willingness to listen, to understand, and somehow, that had been enough. The ships outside the viewport were no longer war machines. They had been reborn, exploration vessels, relief carriers, research fleets. Tools, not threats. Beside him stood Trell, his first officer, a young Veil born long after the ceasefire. She'd grown up on Harmony, spoke 3 languages, wore no tattoos of mourning, only a simple emblem of the new world. My grandfather never talks about the war, she said, eyes soft. Some wounds, Mason replied, take more than 1 lifetime to heal. The Peace Corps ship approached the station, a marvel of engineering, not from any one race, but from all of them. Dominion architecture, Veil energy, human logic, a cathedral of cooperation, built not with nostalgia, but with hope. Inside the council chamber, representatives gathered. Some had once been victims, others enemies. Many were new allies discovered only after war had ceased to blind the stars, but all of them stood as equals now. The Veil Supreme Elder entered beside the Dominion High Commander. Neither had ever seen battle. They had inherited not bitterness, but the burden of what? Not to repeat. Mason stepped to the podium. He carried no weapon, only words. Mason looked out over the gathered council, species once separated by oceans of hate, now seated in the same chamber, breathing the same air, listening together. This is not a treaty, he began. It's not a government, not a flag. It is a promise. He paused, letting the silence breathe. A promise to our future, to our children, to the stars themselves, that we will not repeat the mistakes that nearly ended us all. The chamber remained hushed, not out of disinterest, but reverence. Humanity came to the stars not for territory or triumph, Mason continued. We came because we were curious. And when we found you, we didn't see enemies. We saw people, trapped in a story that no longer served them. So we offered something else. The simple power of perspective. As he spoke, a message came through routine, almost forgettable. A signal from long-range scouts. A new species detected at the edge of the galaxy. Their first radio signals had just touched the void. They too had begun to wonder what lay beyond their sky. Mason's voice didn't falter. We have just received word of new friends. They are taking their first steps into the dark. And the Alliance's first act, our very first, will be to greet them. No fleets, no threats, just welcome. And in that moment, the chamber shifted. The past wasn't forgotten, but it no longer ruled. The first vote of the newly born United Galactic Alliance passed unanimous. After the ceremony, Mason retreated from the lights and voices. He stood alone in a quiet observation deck, holding a small shard of metal. It was old, worn, almost meaningless to those around him, but he remembered it was a fragment of the Pioneer, the ship that had made first contact. That had saved 23 strangers in a dying hull and set the entire galaxy on a different path. It was proof that sometimes, the smallest choices echo the loudest. A young Dominion aide approached, barely out of academy training. "Admiral, the welcome fleet is ready for launch. They await your approval." Mason smiled. "Then tell them this. We approach with open hands, not closed fists. We offer friendship, not demands." The aide tilted his head. "Is there any other way to meet someone new?" Mason didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars, soft and endless. "To us, there used to be, but not anymore." The idea that first contact could mean anything else was becoming unthinkable, and that, he thought, might be humanity's true legacy. The stars were no longer haunted, not by fleets, not by silence, not by the echo of old battles waiting to reignite. They were full of ships now, yes, but ships bearing scientists, diplomats, explorers, vessels that healed instead of harmed, crews that spoke a dozen languages and carried no enemies, only questions. But peace, even after 50 years, was still young. There were still worlds that bore scars too deep for time alone to soothe, still minds raised on suspicion, still leaders who flinched at the word trust. That was why Harmony remained, not as a museum of the past but as proof that the future could be something else. There, in the soil tilled by both Vale and Dominion hands, food grew. Children played beneath rebuilt domes. The humans didn't command. They accompanied. They asked. They listened. One of those children, Trell, now an adult, stood beside Admiral Mason not as an ambassador's aide, but as an equal. She had grown up hearing 2 languages, learning 3 histories. She had never seen a Dominion cruiser fire on a Vale city. She had never crouched in a shelter and waited to die. She had seen something rarer, reconciliation. Hard to believe it was ever different, she said softly. Mason didn't speak for a moment. His eyes tracked the great ships outside the viewport, all docked for the Alliance summit. Dozens of species, dozens of shapes, but all flying toward the same point of convergence. "Some of us remember," he said, "and some still grieve. But look at what we've built." The Peacekeeper approached the station that would host the summit, far larger than Hope Station, far more ambitious. This one wasn't human. It wasn't Vale. It wasn't Dominion. It was all of them. Its core systems were woven together from technologies once designed to destroy one another. Its outer shell bore no flag, but the Alliance sigil, a spiral of stars enclosing a single open hand. Inside, the grand chamber buzzed with soft activity. Old enemies passed each other in the halls and exchanged nods instead of fire. Delegates from distant sectors brought news not of uprisings, but of ecological cooperation, of trade routes shared, of interspecies festivals that had drawn more laughter than even the humans expected. The war that had once seemed eternal was now a memory, not gone, but reclaimed, a story no longer written in fire. The chamber grew still. Representatives from 37 species filled the tiered seats, every eye fixed on the center platform. There, Admiral Mason stood not as a soldier, not even as a leader, but as a reminder that once, a tiny ship from an unknown world had stumbled into the oldest war the galaxy had ever known, and refused to choose a side. "We are not here to erase the past," Mason began. "We are here to ensure it does not define us." He spoke without flourish, without dramatics, just the truth. For too long, strength meant force, victory meant silence, peace meant surrender. But now we know true strength is in understanding. And peace. Peace is something you build, not something you demand. He looked out at them, Dominion, Vale, and dozens more. Some had once been collateral damage. Others had never known the war at all. But they had all come, all chosen to belong. Humanity did not change this galaxy by force. We changed it by asking a question no one else dared. What if we did things differently? He paused, then smiled. And we weren't the only ones who answered. Thunderous approval rose not as triumph, but as relief. The past had been survived. The future would be shaped, afterward. Mason stepped away from the noise, walking a quiet corridor toward his ship. He pulled from his coat the same fragment of metal he always carried, the piece of the Pioneer, scorched and dented, small enough to fit in one hand. He held it like a compass, though it pointed nowhere. It wasn't about where they were going. It was about how. Behind him, footsteps approached. A young Ada species newly welcomed into the Alliance hurried to catch up. Admiral, the welcome mission is awaiting final go-ahead. He nodded. Then let them go. Make sure they carry the message clearly. The aide tilted her head. And what message is that? Mason looked out one last time at the stars, at all they still held, at all they might yet become, that we greet with open hands, not closed fists, that we offer friendship, not fear, and that we remember who we used to be, so we never become that again. The aide nodded slowly. There is no other way to greet the unknown, is there? Mason's voice was quiet, but certain. No, not anymore. And so, as the stars awaited new voices and new worlds turned curious eyes to the sky, humanity and the galaxy it had helped men step forward, together, not to conquer, but to welcome.